the inability for companies and organizations to pivot quickly and therefore become productive faster, so the very definition of that workforce readiness gap, results in $8.5 trillion in unrealized revenue. So we call that 6-7 trillion pounds. In addition, this expectation gap that we talked about, it leads to attrition. And we have a research that shows that's estimated at $5.7 trillion. Combined, that's a $14 trillion problem.
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're tuning in from. Welcome to the HR Leaders Podcast. Today is a special episode. We're going to be discussing how to solve the workforce readiness gap. To explore this topic, I'm joined by Vincent Bellevue, who's the Chief International Officer at Cornerstone. Vincent, welcome to the show. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Hi everyone.
Nice to see you. I thought, before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and sort of the journey to the role that you're in now. Just give everyone a bit of an overview.
Sure. So I'm Vincent Bellevue. I'm actually based in Paris. I grew up in Canada, and I started my career as a management consultant at McKinsey & Company, but quickly moved into the software business. And since the last 17 years, I've been part of the executive leadership team for Cornerstone On Demand and have witnessed the many shifts and turns and twists throughout the history of the company. In fact, we'll be talking about change a bit later, I think. And, I have seen quite a bit of change during those 17 years, but I'm very excited about the future. I'm responsible for all the international business of the company, so all the revenue outside of the Americas.
Wow. First thing I was thinking is 17 years. What would you say has kept you engaged so long in the organization for 17 years?
So it's a combination of, I love our customers, working with them. I love the problems that we solve. They keep evolving, they keep changing. And then this company keeps reacting to the market environment and trying to be proactive and ahead of the game, helping our customers stay ahead of the game. That's what's kept me all this time and is still motivating me tremendously.
Yeah, well, with the pace of change, it's always something to keep you interested as well, right? And so I wanted to start with, some of the audience right now may have not heard of the workforce readiness gap. This may be the first time of them hearing of this. What are the key factors that are driving this sort of overwhelming change in the global workforce?
Yeah, before I talk about the workforce readiness gap, let me first talk about the change, a new constant in the world. Change is a new normal, if you will. And I think every CEO, every CHRO, every chief learning officer I interact with constantly tells me right now, things seem to be accelerating like never before. And we've distilled at Cornerstone through our 7,000 customers, the various research we do, the many conversations we have, we've distilled the problem to 4 key factors. All this change culminates with, on the first-hand side, a set of generational demands that have changed over time. So you'll have 5 generations working side by side for the first time in history, with younger workers, for instance, demanding focus on purpose, diversity and inclusion, social impact, whilst at the same time you have an impending knowledge gap or attrition about to happen and talent gap with an aging workforce retiring progressively. At the same time, you have the rise of the gig and remote work. So that first topic of generational demands is a critical one. The second one is the globalization and the geopolitical shifts. They create a really volatile environment for businesses. As economies like China and India grow, I'm responsible for those territories within Cornerstone. The fight for technological supremacy becomes really, really fierce. Leading to geopolitical uncertainties and far beyond these geographies, of course. Add to that the climate change, the resource scarcity associated with that, and then you have the disrupted supply chains that ultimately impact customer behavior. That's the second big shift or driver behind the change. The third one is the really tight labor market and the demand for very specific skills now. It is said by the World Economic Forum, you've all heard many stats, but that 44% of our workers' skills will be disrupted by 2028. So think about, Chris, your job, my job. On average, maybe mine is even more. 44% of what I do in a day and what I think I'm really good at, I hope so, that will be to be thrown out the window, and I need to reinvent myself even faster than before. And organizations struggle to find the skills that are the most on demand. It's exemplified if I take examples of, the automotive industry that, when I meet leaders of those organizations and they tell me we're now a technology company focused on mobility with electric vehicles, it's a massive amount of shifts. It's not just the electric to combustion to electric. It's also the business model changes. Think about AI and a change for everyone. And, there are prompt engineers becoming a key skill now, for instance. Which leads to the fourth factor that I wanted to bring up, which is data and technology explosion. How many applications do you use and you consume today in your day-to-day work, let alone your personal life? And how fragmented is the data now across all the systems? And how much all of that is accelerated by AI and automation? That demands really rapid skill evolution. There are misconceptions about AI, that it will replace jobs. And it's true, it will automate some of the jobs. But in reality, AI mostly transforms roles, requiring existing employees to adapt or risk really being replaced in the end by those that will have those skills. So all these factors are creating a perfect storm, complicating work, necessitating a more dynamic and adaptable approach. Less than 1 in 4 leaders, according to a survey from PwC, can identify the skills they need in the future. Less than 1 in 4 leaders are able to tell you the skill they need in the future. But it's altering customer behavior, altering market dynamics, the technological landscape and regulatory framework. It's leading to kind of ultimate VUCA, this concept of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So in summary, the pace of change is accelerating across the globe, and organizations are struggling to adapt. Every industry is experiencing this change, and there are lots of implications for the workforce.
Yeah, no, a lot to take in there. What is the cost of organizations who don't adapt?
So let me just, before jumping in on the actual cost, let me zoom in on what we just talked about. I described a lot of change. Mm-hmm. And initially, my own thinking was that change was the problem. But in fact, change is a fact. Change will happen. Change will always be there. The real problem, when you think about it, and all of you in HR have been doing this for a long time, just not naming it this way, the real problem is the workforce readiness gap. The more change there is, the more the workforce is behind that change. And at the pace of change right now, the workforce is increasingly out of sync with the pace of change. So we call this the workforce readiness gap. And in fact, we like to think about breaking down the workforce readiness gap in a number of key areas. Before I do that, we've done research to get there. We work with Lighthouse Research, an advisory firm, and there's a joint research together that highlights a number of findings about the challenges the employees face, but also the strategies that one can deploy to react to that. And in that research, we found that 2/3 of workers feel the workplace is changing faster than ever. So completely validating the thesis I just described. And nearly half express very big concerns around insufficient support and resources to adapt. So this has led us to break down the problem in 3 core dimensions. The first one is that required skills are changing faster than you can upskill. So that's the skills gap. There's a discrepancy between the skills your workforce currently has and the skills you as an organization need to adapt rapidly. 2, there's an expectations gap. So you're investing in your people's skill and development. Everyone I meet tells me that, but it's not meeting the growing needs of your employees. So there's an expectations gap. 3, most organizations I speak to tell me they don't have good visibility about these skills. Data is trapped in disparate systems. Organizations are still getting blindsided. So all these technological systems don't speak to each other. So that's a visibility gap. So when you ask me about the cost of that workforce readiness gap, there are a number of stats. There's a really nice Korn Ferry study that outlines that the inability for companies and organizations to pivot quickly and therefore become productive faster, so the very definition of that workforce readiness gap, results in $8.5 trillion in unrealized revenue. So we call that 6-7 trillion pounds. In addition, this expectation gap that we talked about, it leads to attrition. And we have a research that shows that's estimated at $5.7 trillion. Combined, that's a $14 trillion problem. If you take it organization by organization, a very conservative analysis by our research shows that a 10,000 employee company can save between $4 to $7 million a year just by implementing world-class workforce agility. and improving their retention. If you try to look at kind of less dollar facts, but still hard figures coming from surveys, 7 in 10 leaders say that the lack in skills clarity put a cost or burden on their organization. 57% of HR leaders say that skills shortages undermine corporate performance. And then 63% of enterprise leaders and business leaders, they don't believe their workforce is adaptable to change. Even worse, 53% of organizations state that employee productivity is at its maximum capacity. So this brings up to a very clear conclusion. The workforce readiness gap is very real, and it's critical for organizations to solve it.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's interesting because it sounds like the leaders are all aware of it, employees are, and we have the research. So what's the barrier? what's stopping us? Because it sounds like everyone's aligned on that. So what is the challenge for us to make this change?
I think we needed that research, that analysis, looking at the problem this way, not saying it's change and not saying it's just about learning and development or about talent management, but rather looking at a comprehensive workforce agility framework and strategy. So the solution for organizations is to take a step back and consider their workforce agility strategy so their workforce can adapt faster than the changes in their organization and the world today. And that will lead to competitive advantage, innovation, growth, and also, frankly, survival. Now, you might ask, okay, well, that's a nice statement, but where do I start? So look, a workforce agility strategy focuses on resolving the 3 dimensions of the workforce readiness gap we talked about. A skilling strategy to bridge the skills gap, so rapidly building the skills that are needed for your business. A career and talent management and experience strategy to bridge the expectation gap, that gap between the employees and the company. Finding that intersection between each individual's, you, me, everyone's needs and wants versus what the organization needs. When you match that intersection, you're in a better position than ever. As well as bridging the visibility gap. So that's providing you talent intelligence solutions to provide the needed visibility to rapidly pivot and adapt your business. So those are the 3 aspects. I can zoom in a little bit on each. On the skilling aspect, our research found that 80% of employers think their workforce receive adequate training and development in their jobs, but only 42% of employees agree. So again, there's a big gap. It requires driving, the company, all the company, throughout skilling initiatives. What happens is, of course, you want to drive your company mandated programs. You have to. Your company has identified a strategy. You need to cascade that down. But you also can't map out all the needs of every individual needed to deliver and adapt. And therefore, you need to empower your workforce and offer them extremely personalized opportunity to grow, creating a culture of continuous skills development, a passion for lifelong learning, a drive to develop. And of course, you need to equip them with the right technology to achieve that. That's on skilling. On career and talent management, another interesting finding in our report is that over half of employees are planning to leave the organization within the next 6 months or are unsure to stay. This can have huge implications for businesses. So workforce agility strategies hinge on the continuous identification and closure of those skills gaps. So one of the keys is to better match the skills of the employees with the needs of the organization, essentially creating an internal career marketplace, an internal marketplace of talent, where you offer development and opportunities aligned with the employee's aspirations, yet also the company's requirements. In addition, to achieve that, you need to deploy modern performance and succession management approaches and bring in the right talent in your business. So that's the second one. The third one is around talent intelligence strategy and bridging that visibility gap. And one of our report's key finding is that nearly half of the workforce do not think their employer keeps track of their skills. Half of people feel their employer doesn't know, Vincent or Chris.
Are they right, Vincent?
Well, I'd like to think not at Cornerstone, but we're not perfect either.
Oh, they're joking.
Yeah, and this needs to be addressed by business leaders. So in order to survive, you do need to have complete visibility of workforce data and skills. Here you want to harness really the power of AI, and that will then inform your business decisions. That will allow you to pivot and gain that kind of comprehensive view of your capabilities including not only employees, but also external contributors, be it partners or contractors.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Could you share, there's a lot of information to take in, and I think for our audience, it'd be great if you could share some examples of how some of the companies that you're working with are doing this from a practical point of view, just to really help put it in the context for everyone listening right now.
Of course, I can think about one of our customers, probably known to everyone here, would be DHL. They made it a priority to understand their existing workforce skills and to anticipate the necessary skills tomorrow. They have 5 divisions, more than 560,000 employees operating across the world. So they needed to join together the workforce and ensure everyone had the right opportunity for career and skills development based on a deep understanding of everyone's skills. So with their career marketplace, they launched a shift to making personalized skills-based recommendations on learning and careers that focus on the person's experience. And they've seen massive impact, notably, for instance, on learning consumption, a 93% jump in 18 months, same with completions. So really, really significant impact, and a project that's being rolled out globally in that organization. Mm-hmm. I could talk about GMV, a technological business group with an international presence that offers innovating solutions in diverse sectors like space, aeronautical, defense, to name a few.
Yeah.
Their goal there was seamlessly integrating our Cornerstone Galaxy and to streamline recruitment, internal mobility, and really ultimately foster more and more job mobility, boosting engagement and retention, and achieving that agility, leveraging our analytics to make data-driven decisions. Maybe, I could go on and on about customers, but maybe one more example would be with Rimac. They are a automobile organization, manufacturer, headquartered out of Sveta Nedelja, and that's in Croatia. And they develop and produce electric sports cars. Their sister company, Rimac Technology, also produces drivetrains and battery system for the automotive businesses. And they believe strongly that the focus of an organization should be its people. They are clearly in a very rapidly evolving business, and they find that skills and gaps in job roles will change, but people will remain. So developing people at their own pace and helping them bridge that gap, or those gaps that we talked about, is critical. So they claim that the power and flexibility of Cornerstone Galaxy gives their employees the tools they need. Those are some examples that I can cover here.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people in terms of where to get started? Because it's a lot of information, a lot of work. Where's the best place for people to start?
Sure. Well, let's take a step back. There's a problem clearly whereby there's so much change, and people are not keeping up with that change. We call this the Workforce Readiness Gap. And there's kind of 3 dimensions to it: a skills gap, and an expectations gap, and a visibility gap. Mm-hmm. We've analyzed those earlier with data. We have great research that can support you to start thinking about the problem. The reality is every company is at a different stage of maturity in that journey. So all the organizations I work with,
sure,
prioritize one area versus another and are at a different stage of the journey towards true workforce agility. It takes an investment, and that's very important to keep in mind, in both culture and technology. So you can, put all the efforts you want on culture, it won't be enough. Because of the fragmentation of roles, of skills, etc., it's no longer possible without the help of technology. But vice versa, you can put the best technology in the world, you also need to work on the culture. So I would say identify where you're at on the journey, identify your priorities. We'll meet you where you are is our philosophy to support our customers. Mm-hmm. And it's very critical that you understand the role of your leaders. First of all, the HR leaders, and then your business leaders. So as HR leaders, you play a critical role. You orchestrate the strategy. You create the necessary infrastructure that allows the organization's leaders, the business leaders at all levels, to foster that culture of agility, continuous development. And it's not a one-time event. It's really a journey. You, as HR leader, want to ensure that the structures, not only systems, but also policies are in place to support those leaders. More specifically, you want to identify the skills gaps and forecast future talent needs. You want to help create pathways for employee growth through training, mentoring, succession planning. And you want to create and refine those policies and processes to really promote internal mobility. And one important thing, you want to remove barriers to cross-functional collaboration, really truly enhancing agility. Mm-hmm. And then you want to interact with your business leaders. Your top executives, they need to be communicating that mindset culture shift where talent is viewed as a company-wide asset. You want to mitigate the issue of sort of talent hoarding, enabling rapid organizational responsiveness to emerging.
That's quite a big shift, though, right? Talent hoarding is that in itself is a big culture shift.
So for instance, some of the leading organizations evaluate leaders on their talent mobility, like how much mobility are they generating within their units and also outside. That's about promoting that culture of internal mobility. Mm-hmm. In addition, you also want to create a culture, and those top executives need to communicate the need to create a culture of lifelong learning, of curiosity. That innovation won't happen, and keeping pace with time won't happen without that.
Yeah.
And if you go one level down, your senior leaders, your middle management, they must be champion of a culture that prioritizes that culture, continuous learning, that intellectual curiosity. And they must be always pushing, driving people to enhance their skill set, their attitudes, their competencies. At their level in the organization, they must push what's critical for them skills-wise. Then, of course, the frontline managers need to be embedded in that program. And they're the ones that will be coaching the employees. They're so close to employee and customer feedback. And they have a massive influence, and this is where you want to leverage them to coach, to champion career development, to facilitate job mobility. Yeah, so those are some of the advice around where to start and how to approach the problem.
Yeah, but to your point, though, everyone's at different stages of their journey, right? So there's not going to be a one size fits all approach to organizations.
Correct. And one way to think about it is to think about those three gaps and three solution areas, if you will, around, driving is your top priority right now, is the skills you need right now, right then, and drive the skilling initiatives and make sure you have the right infrastructure in place to drive that. Is your challenge more around that expectations gap? There's a disconnect between the employees and the manager and the company and the managers. And you need to create that career mobility internally and foster that match between employee desires and company needs, then drive that second category, bridging that expectation gap and driving that career and talent management and experience kind of area. Or third, are you starting with a challenge with fragmented data? Is that your number one problem? Not having visibility on your skills information in your business, then you can start there. That's how we like to support our customers around that journey. We like to offer a holistic approach to solving the problem, but it's very modular from a technology standpoint, but more so from a rollout standpoint and prioritization standpoint. You can go at sub pieces of the problem and move along the maturity model, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned a little bit earlier, but could you just break down a little bit? What do you feel like the cost is going to be for companies that don't make these changes? What are the implications going to be?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of implications. We talked about earlier this notion that Korn Ferry has this report that outlines that at a broad macro level, in the world, there's an $8.5 trillion unrealized value from organizations being unable to pivot. One of the challenges is if you're not creating an agile workforce, if you let the workforce readiness gap widen and widen and widen relative to what's happening in the market, you literally fall behind. So the first implications of not reacting and not thinking about this problem is actually kind of the survival risk and declining risk as an organization. Now, I prefer to think optimistically and positively about this. And rather see the opportunity is to create competitive advantage by reducing that workforce readiness gap, staying ahead of your competitors. And then the flip side of that is you'll improve speed to productivity, you'll reduce time to market, you'll encourage growth and expansion, you'll accelerate innovation, you'll build customer retention and satisfaction, All that because your workforce is more agile to today's problems
Mm-hmm.
and what your customers expect, and driving more innovation. In terms of your employees, you'll give them more control on their career, on their development, to match those micro needs that you can't identify at the company level. It will boost their retention, ultimately increasing financial metrics like your
Yeah.
revenue, your EBITDA, and reducing your risk and costs. So that's what's at play by not reacting to the workforce readiness gap and not driving a proactive workforce agility strategy.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think is very clear, though, this is the role of the whole organization, not just HR, right? HR are leading the charge, but this is an organizational change, a cultural change. But what advice would you give to HR leaders specifically that are listening on how to lead this change? Advice, because you spoke to many of them, right, with the work that you do. What advice would you give to those HR leaders that are listening right now and say, I want to choose one of those 3 areas? What would be the advice that you'd give to them?
Sure. One is, take the time to understand the problem, identify your strategy, but don't take too much time because you got to get going. It cannot be perfect right away. So separate out the short-term versus long-term view. You have time to work out the perfect long-term strategy, but you got to get going now. So identify your priorities. Get going. Always have in mind that you have a destination. Prepare for, play the chess game and prepare for 2-3 steps down the road, but start with step 1 and have impact and real results there. Another aspect, we talked about it, is getting kind of executive support and really taking the time to explain the problem, why it's important. This is a conversation I've had with CEOs, and they get it. Perhaps sometimes in transparency more than people in HR or IT, right? So this is a problem that they'll go, yeah, absolutely agree. I got that problem. So make sure you solicit and bring on board your top leadership, and then cascade that down. 3 is in the creation of the momentum towards workforce agility. Showcase champions. So identify in the countries, in the divisions, or if you're a smaller organization, in your offices, people that are clearly naturally adept to agility and will embrace your program and will become your champions. People replicate success, and making sure you have a clear identification of champions in your business will really help you. Those would be 3 pragmatic, simple tips.
Is there anything, before I let you go, Vincent, that we haven't covered that you think is really important that we need to share with everyone?
Look, the pace of change is there to stay. So there is no doubt that it is a fact. It's the new normal. Everything we describe around those 4 key drivers of change, that's there. That will probably only accelerate, notably through technology. The need to resolve the workforce readiness gap that's resulting from that is indisputable. And therefore, make sure you solicit alignment with your sponsors, with your business, so that it's understood that there's a need to react and drive a workforce agility program. And I think our research with Lighthouse Research, combined with Cornerstone, provides you with a really, really good starting guide or starting report to start thinking through where to start and how to have impact.
Yeah, no, definitely. And to everyone listening, and firstly, thank you so much, Viz, for coming on the show and sharing this with everyone. It's given us a lot to think about. And my teams, wherever you're watching right now, whatever platform, the link to the research, the Lighthouse and Cornerstone Research, the Workforce Readiness Gap research is in the chat. So wherever you are right now, click on that. Make sure you download it. It will really help you understand why you need workforce agility and to identify the costs if you don't have it. So make sure you download that now, grab a copy. Also share it with your colleagues as well. The reason we do these shows, the reason we do the podcast is to help each other. So make sure you share it as well with your other colleagues, wherever you are. Apart from that, Vincent, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you all the best until we next speak. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Chris. And we're doing a world tour to explain this concept of the workforce readiness gap and workforce agility. I'll be in Sydney next week, in London in 2 weeks. We were in Frankfurt last week, in Paris in about a month. in Mumbai, in Orlando very soon. So don't hesitate to come and join us. It's called the Connect Live Tour, and you're all very welcome.
Is there a particular website for that? Connect Live? I suppose if people Google it, they'll find it, or do you know the exact link? We can shout it out now.
Yeah, well, I'll have the team react probably online right now and share it in the chat.
So it's going to be shared in the chat now as well. So make sure we post that wherever you are in the world. If you can come join us, that would be fantastic. Well, look, enjoy the rest of your day, Vincent, and I'll see you again soon. But I appreciate you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Likewise. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Really enjoyed the conversation. Bye, everyone.
Bye.